Welcome to Ask the Expert on Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group, the number one community around all things talent, contingent workforce, and the gig economy. I have a really cool topic today, and I think it's one that is super, super relevant, even though we're in an economic kind of cycle where there isn't, as rapid fire hiring as it once was, but it's a topic of direct sourcing. And direct sourcing is as relevant or more relevant today that people should be looking at this more than ever. And I've got a great guest, and the topic today is direct sourcing isn't going to replace your MSP, it's just rewriting their role. And someone I have on today, I've known for many, many years in different capacities, of course, but amazing person who's spent over 20 years in the contingent workforce space, either on the client side or in MSP operations. She's led and launched many workforce programs and direct sourcing specific programs across Deloitte and Tundra and TalentNet Technologies. She's an expert in direct sourcing strategy, supplier curation, and talent curation models and workforce operations. Integrating direct sourcing into a program with MSPs and the different stakeholders is tough. And Laura has a massive amount of experience, if not the most experience in the marketplace today. So I'm so excited to have Laura, Boby on today to talk about that. And I'm not going to talk about how long we've known each other because it dates both of us, but it's been a very, very long time and we have a lot of history together. I'm so happy that you took time out of your travel schedule and client meeting schedule to spend some time today with me.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, let's not go back into, what we were doing 20 years ago, but really happy to be on with you to have this conversation.
So, direct sourcing, hot topic a few years back.
Mhm.
As economic cycles wane, people start thinking, oh, well, we're not hiring as much, so I won't invest in finding my own talent and being a source of
Mhm.
talent, which is so
Yeah.
crazy to me because this is the time where you should be more strategic and start thinking about it, especially when talent is available and interested in jobs where you can find them and start to create, bring them into your ecosystem. You know, the topic though is specifically around working within a multi-stakeholder environment and specifically
Yeah.
with your MSPs, because sometimes clients, as they're looking at this, go, well, why do I need an MSP if I'm using a direct sourcing curation company, right?
Mhm.
And I'd love to demystify those relationships in the conversation today. So, what is this topic all about, and why does it matter?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Jeff. Like I've heard from, some people that, direct sourcing has kind of fizzled out, that they're not hearing much chatter about it. My experience is completely different. I think that to your point, and maybe what's an economic downturn for a lot of our customers has become the perfect time to actually explore this. And I also find there's this perceived push and pull between MSPs because, well, they're there to manage your supply chain and you're going to consolidate your supply chain. So doesn't that make them redundant? We've seen that to be really theoretical. Like we partner with some really fantastic MSPs and it's created opportunities for programs to evolve. Like I think, we were joking, we've known each other for 20 years. Like has a lot changed in that time? Like, kind of, but like not really. And so I see it as, a very good catalyst to like look at what MSPs are doing. What are you doing with your program? Like if you're a program manager and your company's going through a downturn, like here's a great way to find, more opportunity for yourself, more value in the program. I think it's a pretty clear time to look at it.
Yeah, and you finally have a moment to breathe, right? And start to
Yeah.
take a step back and think more strategically. And what
Hmm.
did you want to do, right?
Yeah.
When you have that time to think, you go, okay, what do we want to do with this program? Do we want to bring it in-house? Do we want to, keep it strategic with an MSP, which generally is the case. And
Yeah.
then, direct sourcing is truly starting to take hold, and you need to really start think strategically around your talent, right? And
Mhm.
even though you may not be hiring now, you will have those needs. And quite honestly, the talent pools are shrinking and
Yeah.
becoming more difficult to find the talent you want and need. There may be
Mhm.
talent out there, but finding the quality talent is
Yeah.
always a difficult
Well,
scenario.
yeah, and getting access to them, right? I mean, it's this idea too, we won't go down this rabbit hole, but like, is AI going to consolidate or eliminate skill sets? I think it's going to consolidate them, which means that you're probably going after the same talent as your biggest competitors. Why not do it using your great brand? Why not do it with your employee or contractor proposition to the market? I think it's kind of the perfect time because everything we do is an evolution, right? It's going to come back. It's cyclical. We'll be in a place where we say there's nobody to hire, and I have all these open seats, and so why not get prepared? And I think we've done that really effectively with a lot of customers. It feels scary to one of the points you mentioned, like, well, I need my MSP, and do I need marketing to say yes, and legal, and there's technology, and like, where the heck do I even start? Why even upset the apple cart? And so we have a lot of conversations with customers that start like that. Like, this seems like really complicated. Um, I find the reality is it's not that complicated, but it can be scary.
Yeah, well, and it's a source of talent, right? And it's using your
Mhm.
own employment brand to
Yeah.
attract talent. And quite honestly, even if you're using the sourcing channels through your supply chain and different vendors, you really
Hmm.
have to use your employment brand because your vendors are using your employment brand as a great place to work to attract talent. Why not
Yeah.
start thinking about it more holistically and doing it for yourself as well, right? What are some of the
Yeah.
benefits of direct sourcing? I know, we're talking on a deeper level, thinking about the multi-stakeholder environment, but let's take a step back and
Mhm.
why would a company want to do direct sourcing?
Yeah, I mean, the first one people think of is cost, and it can be a cost avoidance, cost reduction play, absolutely. And so that's always on the list. But to your point, like, we're talking talent, and that's what I think the focus of this conversation is. It's increasing your fulfillment across the board, so ensuring that you can deliver ultimately what your business needs in whatever skill set, whatever location. It's a significant reduction in time to fill because of how we operate these programs, right? That's huge. Like, you've got talent pools that have been sitting there, they've been curated, they're ready to go for the roles that you have coming in. That speed reduction is cannot be overstated. How important that is. And then the other one, which, like, I think there's this old idea that contractors are just contractors. Like, they care about the work, they don't care about the company. That's not true. We see, like, contract completions, conversions to full time, extensions of contracts are way higher when they come through the direct sourcing channel. So the impacts are, they multiply across these programs.
No, and you've hit so many of the benefits and so many strong points around thinking more strategically and programmatically
Yeah.
about attracting the right talent, engaging them faster. There is, yes, cost is part of that, but in a lot of organizations today, it's not really the cost as the main driver. It's
Mhm.
getting access to talent and getting
Yeah.
access the right talent, but quicker.
Hmm.
And if you have less, let's call it just layman's terms, cooks in the kitchen and
Yeah.
handoffs, generally you're able to get talent in quicker. And
Yeah.
then I love the idea of the productivity gains, having that
Hmm.
direct relationship with the workers, and often your managers having direct relationships with your workers too, by having
Yeah.
engagement strategies, communication strategies with this pool of talent. They
Hmm.
feel a part of your company. And sometimes, if you're thinking strategically, it's alumni as well who's worked on your
Yeah.
projects in the past that come
Hmm.
into the talent pool, be ready to re-engage on future projects. And that
Yeah.
that really cuts down on that learning curve up front when you're bringing talent in.
It's huge. It's almost like I am a visual person, so I think of it as you're kind of closing the door on one side of the ecosystem where you're retaining talent, but like you're retaining knowledge and information and the ability for people to actually step in and understand your environment quickly, and not have them maybe ever exposed to the external market. You know, they can continue to work on unique projects across the org, but they know you. They know exactly what you're looking for. Um, it's massive. Why not control it? The whole idea, I think, of a contingent labor program is some level of control. Start to police and control what's happening with the talent that you ultimately invest in.
Yeah, it is. And I think at the end of the day, we're seeing a lot of organizations having huge success with their direct sourcing programs to the extent that, you know, biggest part of and in terms of percentages of the workforce being brought in is through the direct sourcing programs, be it pre-identified referrals
Yep.
or recruited resources through the curated talent pools that
Hmm.
are bringing in direct sourcing, et cetera. So,
Yeah.
and I think, you've nailed so many of the benefits. And of course, the cost savings can be considerable depending
Yes.
on how you do it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
interesting enough, let's talk about the layers within a direct sourcing program or a contingent program when you add, you know, the all the different partners together. In some cases, cost is the same, or in some cases, it could be even more. Have you
Yeah.
seen those situations?
We have, I would say, for the most part, we are able to kind of come in with you think about that stacked price, right? You're looking at a service provider. There's burdens in there for employment, an EOR fee potentially. There's a technology fee, and then you still get your MSP and BMS fee.
Yeah.
We are still seeing that we're able to create a differential at that point. What we're also able to do because we're accessing talent through the brand is we're often able to access that talent at a lower price point and we're able to come in under bill rate as well, which ends up being kind of the true cost savings that most customers actually care about and that their procurement teams will accept from them. So there's those 2 points to consider. I'll say, Jeff, like where we run into situations where we're not able to offer that kind of competitive cost advantage would be, I've seen it where there's a sole supplier situation already in place for, let's say, a distribution center or something that's a little more kind of geographically bound.
Yeah.
But if you think of your big enterprise programs, for the most part, we are coming kind of under that supplier average that's in the market. But, as I go through those, you talk about those cooks in the kitchen. Um, that's a lot of people. It's a lot of
Mhm.
different, suppliers ultimately to get in line.
Yeah. And so in talking about the layers, of course, there's the coordination layer at the MSP level, plus the
Hmm.
curation layer
Yeah.
at the direct sourcing program solutions area as well. You
Yeah.
know, and so the topic we talked about is what are some of the best practices around working within that multi-stakeholder environment?
Hmm.
Um, One thing I'd love to hear about, though, are what are some of the risks and obstacles that you've seen in that
Hmm.
multi-stakeholder environment, right? Because there's successful programs you've seen, and then there
Yeah.
are potentially some less successful programs because the
Hmm.
multi-stakeholders weren't working together, maybe as
Yeah.
you've seen in the past where there's successful ones, and
Hmm.
things break down. So, what are some of the obstacles and risks of a multi-stakeholder environment when implementing direct sourcing?
Yeah. I mean, like we always say internally, like we've skinned our knees. We've not done this well early on. We've learned our lessons. It's not, it's not simple. Every program is unique. I would say there's three big ones probably that come to mind, which is if we're entering into a conversation with a customer and they're not relying on their MSP, they're not bringing their MSP into these conversations, they don't view them as a strategic partner already, that's a really bad place for us to start.
Mhm.
Um, I think that we look for the MSP to be our partner because we have the same goals ultimately with that customer. And so being a part of the journey from day one, how are you defining direct sourcing? Do we all agree that that makes sense in that environment? How are we tracking it? Do we have shared performance metrics that make sense and will benefit the MSP, the client, and the direct sourcing partner? Great. And I do think it's clarity, like that sponsor on the client side really needs to be clear on why they're doing direct sourcing. And I think that also like helps remove some of the fear of the MSP.
Yeah.
If they can say, we're going to bring in direct sourcing, yeah, maybe we're going to consolidate our supply chain, but here's then what we're also going to do with the MSP program because you're strategic. Let me give you time to be strategic. And that really helps. But I think where we've fallen down is where there's not a clear path. We're not all marching in the same direction. And it sounds stupid. I mean, everything in life kind of comes down to communication, but that's really what it is.
Yeah.
It's an open conversation. And hey, let's document some of it too, so we all remember what we agreed to.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not a silly comment to talk about communication and
No.
trust, right? I think if everybody trusts and understands their role in the process,
Hmm.
then and then you'll find that over time that trust is built. People are more comfortable working together,
Yeah.
appreciating each other's roles because everybody has a very important role, right? The MSP is there to coordinate the overall program. They've got pressures
Hmm.
for fill rates, etc.
Yeah.
The direct sourcing partner and curation partner can be help with all of those things and
Yeah.
help drive cost savings, help drive better fulfillment, quality of candidates, satisfaction of the clients, all
Yeah.
of those things. There's a shared goal. And I think if everybody understands that, that is key. And so,
Hmm.
and when things go wrong, I loved how you said, let's document this up front and agree to it and
Yeah.
communicate those roles as well, because sometimes with
Hmm.
multi-stakeholder situations, you get a little
Yeah.
bit of finger pointing. And so, how did you overcome some of those things?
Yeah, I think, as with anything, right? Like I think about the evolution of the MSP itself, which took 30 years, really, I
Yeah.
would say. I think we're going through that right now. It's learning and seeing what works and what doesn't and gaining confidence as an organization to stand up and say, hey, if we can't do this, that's okay, but we may not be the partner for you, or your definition of direct sourcing may not align with ours. And I think like and maybe I did say this at the beginning, but I think, where we've seen this fall down is individuals who really do not understand direct sourcing. It's talked about a lot. Like, what is it? What are the mechanics? What should you expect of it? I think making sure that that aligns with those three parties is really important because one of the things I remember I had a customer once say, well, we'll just, put this into our program. We won't tell anybody. I'm like, well, that, bit of a bit of a red
Yeah.
flag. This isn't something you just do kind of in the, shadow of darkness. Let's, talk about it. It's part of your whole ecosystem. And I think just knowing that it's not a plug-in solution and you walk away, that it should be a strategic pillar. But, it's the way you learn anything. You fall down, it breaks, you fix it, and you do it better next time.
Yeah. And I think once again, going back to the communication is communicate this all to all parties,
Hmm.
talk about the strategic benefit to it to all parties, be it the hiring managers, your MSP partners, and working
Yeah.
together, and even your current supply chain. If
Hmm.
what couldn't be worse is potentially not telling your existing supply chain that this is a direction that they're moving it within,
Hmm.
to be honest, right? And understand that. And I think, you know, it's so important to engage your existing supply chain because at the end of the day, this isn't replacing the existing supply chain, it's enhancing it
Yeah.
often in a lot of cases. Do
Mhm.
you have some examples and during implementation some best practices about how to communicate out to the other stakeholders in the ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of nailed it. I think we're very big on transparency, and what we often see is like, there can be programs where their supply chain or their supplier list, let's say, is very well managed, but I've yet run into a program where there is an opportunity for consolidation, which ultimately can mean more business for your better suppliers, more clarity for what you need from them. And so ensuring that the client is willing to send that message, that they are, able to offer some sort of clarity on what the next iteration of the program will look like for them, is really important. But when it comes to implementation, I think it's look, the MSPs that we end up working with know the ins and outs of their customers. They know the processes, they know how they work, they know what the managers like, they know what they don't. We come in and we want to learn from that. We don't want to just, again, plug in a standard direct sourcing program and assume it's going to work. It really is collaboration and adjustment, going through workflows to say, okay, this is how it's written on paper, or this is how the technology is set up to flow. How does it actually operate? Can we add value by being in the room with you, during the intake calls? Can we, add value in things that are already happening instead of rebuilding a brand new process? It's how do you adapt to the parts that are already working? So I think those are the biggest takeaways. And like we keep coming back to that same thing, it's communication. Really, really clear communication with all parties.
So, you know, during your time, not only on the client side, but in the vendor side, and then now in the direct sourcing side of things,
Yeah.
technology, right? It often
Mhm.
was sold as a technology play,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And the early adopters of technology often didn't see the results in terms of percentages of their directly sourced workers when they
Yeah.
just had technology. You
Mhm.
know, what have you seen the evolution of the programs, you know, from just a technology play
Mhm.
to, and that's generally, I've seen that as a potential risk where you plug in
Yes.
technology and you say, build it and they will come, hoping,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
nothing results. Like, how have you seen this evolve and some of the most successful programs, how they've brought in the curation aspects, and how has technology evolved as well in this space?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like I do think there's a part where if you just do technology, which to your point, yes, I think 5, 6 years ago that was absolutely when people thought of direct sourcing, they thought of technology. It's a technology solution. And I do think companies with great brands can plug in a technology and sure, it'll generate a ton of candidates. But what are you doing with them? And I think that's where it fell short is there is a misconception of what curation is. Curation isn't attracting talent, it's curating them, understanding them, pooling them, getting them ready for the assignments at the right point of time. That was really where it fell down. And obviously, if you can't curate this great pool of candidates that this technology brings to your doorstep, well, there goes your brand in the market, right? It's a terrible experience. It's that black hole um, that candidates dread. So I think the evolution has gone from thinking of direct sourcing as technology only to thinking of it as a technology enabled, like kind of akin to the MSP, right? An
Yeah.
MSP needs a BMS, a curator needs a direct sourcing technology. And so the conversations that I have with customers now are, I love direct sourcing. I'm interested in it. I know what I want out of it. What technology do you think works best for me and my environment? That's really how we started to see it reposition in the market.
And how is the MSP helping in
Yeah.
this? Are they part of the evaluation process? Are they brought in
Hmm.
afterwards to discuss it from an operating perspective? Like,
Hmm.
how have you found? Are they the ones bringing you in often? Like, how does the relationship work between all the different parties?
It varies. We have some really great MSP partners that we work with specifically that will bring us to the table with their customers because they've seen what we do in their other programs. There's others where the conversation is, directly with the customer, and we only get introduced to the MSP, after we ink a contract. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, like great MSPs are strategic partners to their customers, and they are that, that's who they're going to pick the phone up to, if they have a question, they want to evolve their program. So we're very happy for them to be involved in that conversation. Like I said, they're the ones managing the program day to day, likely not the program manager. And so I think it can be really helpful when they're in that room for those conversations. I'd be naive to say that there certainly are some MSPs that are pushing back really heavily on this because I don't think they see it as a partnership. But where we've had success has been when they're at the table. And like, you and I were chatting previously. What I've seen is this like beautiful evolution of the MSP, which I think we've all been like begging for. It shouldn't be transactional. It really should be someone who's embedded in the business. And there's been some cases where we've been able to give them the time to do that. And like, that's the stuff that makes me nerd out. Like, I want to see that happen.
Well, and there are often some conflicts, right?
Mhm.
A lot of the large MSPs are owned by staffing as
Yeah.
well, and they also have direct sourcing arms. And so
Hmm.
in some cases, they potentially see that as a threat to their business or margins that they've maybe given a lower MSP fee to, knowing
Yeah.
that they could leverage some of their staffing revenue in the calculation. And
Yes.
so, there are those situations that come up, but at the end of the day, that's where the conversations and transparency that I think you've mentioned is so important. That if
Yeah.
everybody understands each other's perspectives, be it not only from workflows, from lines of business, from margin structures, and how everybody is sustainable. Because at the end of the day, sustainability of all your partners is something that a client really
Mhm.
has to think about as
Yeah.
you build this. Because if you're always just thinking about squeezing and squeezing and squeezing out of all of the components of your program,
Yeah.
sometimes that may not work for some of the stakeholders, right? And
Yeah.
so I think you're bang on. Everybody should be part of this conversation and be very
Mhm.
transparent around their motivations and their
Yeah.
profit structures and things like that in order to truly architect something that could be beautiful, right? And
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
in the MSP model, um, if they're still, fulfilling and doing a better job, even though it's a direct sourcing provider versus one of their staffing suppliers, often it's more strategic and easier to deal with a
Yeah.
smaller group of vendors, and especially ones that
Mhm.
are alongside working in unison with you versus
Yeah.
having to coordinate the cats, let's call it, in the old school MSPs where you just spit out recs to multiple vendors and hope to see what comes back, right?
Yeah, and I think like that mix too, that ultimately the customer can set what they want that mix to be of fulfillment, right? We have some customers that, 70% direct sourcing fulfillment is as high as they want to go. They have other strategic initiatives that mean that they need 30% filled elsewhere. And in a big program, that is still a lot. And what we've seen those MSPs do is they're now able, to collaborate with us to build, consistent screening. Their, onboarding client side has improved significantly. They've expanded to new countries. They've added, new functionality in the VMS. They've built custom tools for the client. And I think more than anything, their conversations are not transactional anymore with the business. Of course, they have to be. That's part of their job. They're there to be, to manage recs and make sure that the compliance required is met and all of that good stuff. But their leaders are actually talking about like, how do you think about talent in the future? How are you evolving? They're looking at using AI in, I think, ways that are really, value adding to their program as opposed to kind of taking away from it. And so it's an important shift. And good MSPs are starting to do it from what I can see.
Yeah. So, we're kind of getting towards the end of our time.
Mm.
And I always, there's more, I have more questions, but I know we have to kind of wrap it up within this 25, 30 minute time
Yeah.
slot here. You know, as a program lead, either, just starting down the path to say, okay,
Mhm.
I'm looking at direct sourcing, wanting to bring it into my program. Um, I'm not sure about my budgets and all these sorts of things to
Yeah.
make huge investments, but I got to start somewhere. Um,
Mhm.
where where do you start, and what are some really quick wins over the next 6 months to a year that I can
Yeah.
start to analyze and or bring in and start to think about?
Yeah, I think you can get into a situation where, it's paralysis a little bit. I think we all in this space kind of can fall victim to that. I would say because it can feel scary, right? You have your MSP, maybe you have a payroll provider, you have your suppliers. It's a scary question to start to ask in those rooms at times. My suggestion is to reach out to somebody in the space, get connected with somebody who's in your role at a different company
Yeah.
and ask them, hey, I see you did direct sourcing. Can you tell me about it? Can you help me understand it? In a safe space where you don't feel like you're going to upset the apple cart, you're not going to, get kind of a biased opinion. Like we love connecting our customers with each other because they know the pains that it took to go through any sort of evolution, be it direct sourcing or otherwise. So that would be my first place to start is like understand it from somebody who understands you and understands your role first, and that feels pretty safe. And then I think like understanding like is your program agile? Like does it need to be agile? Should it be agile? Is it doing a good job at understanding your business and actually transacting and fulfilling it? If not, like what are those gaps, right? What are the gaps right now? Is it could you improve your time to fill? Are you not hitting the cost savings target that your organization set? Whatever it might be, and just think about like, do you have the tools in front of you to solve those problems? Maybe you do. Maybe you say, you know what? I do need a different component to my program. And the other thing I would say is, understanding direct sourcing in your brand. I think people
Yeah.
think, oh, I need to be I'm not going to say any names because ultimately these are customers who may be listening, but I'm not a big, well-known brand. Well, you might have a really good story to tell in a market or in a
Yeah.
skill set, right? So I wouldn't overlook the value that your brand has. Definitely think about that. What could that do for you? How would it change your program? Um, and then go from there. Start to get into the weeds. Have the conversation with your MSP. I think you break the ice and say, what do you think? You know my program.
Yeah. Well, and I think, knowing your ROI drivers and where your program has gaps and
Hmm.
inefficiencies and things like that that could help, right? I think is huge advice. So, it's
Yeah.
just taking that first step, I think, is a big part of that. And then really delving into saying, why are we doing this? And then the how will come out of that, right?
Exactly. And like, of course, I want to say, like, reach out to Tundra and have conversations with us, but like, have conversations with everyone,
All of them.
anyone who
Yeah.
offers this, right? Like, we genuinely think that, whatever the saying is, a rising tide, raises all ships or whatever. Have conversations with anybody. They'd be happy, people that do this are passionate about what they do. Take your time, educate yourself, understand how people view it differently. I think there's no shame in going through that process ahead of even deciding if it makes sense for you.
100%. Great. Great advice. So, Laura, I can't thank you enough for spending the time with us today and talking about the direct sourcing topic
Yeah.
and navigating a multi-stakeholder environment, because I think it's one thing to say I'm going to go do direct sourcing. It's something different to say I'm actually going to implement it with all the different stakeholders that are involved, from the MSP to the curation specialist to a technology to then your EOR for those directly sourced workers when you bring them in-house, and how you're going to get them all paid. So thank you so much for your time. And I can't, the advice has been amazing.
You're very, very welcome. It's great to spend time with you and actually talk about like an actual topic. Like I think we chit chat so much that we don't often get to it. So I'm glad that we did. And Really, really appreciate you thinking of me for this, Jeff.
Awesome. Thanks again.